Welcome to this edition of the Hoosier Basketball Experience. I'm your host, Phil Eisenbarger. We've talked before about the many facets of the Hoosier Basketball Experience, so while we've interviewed many of my IU basketball friends, this show is about so much more. That's why we've had broadcasters, sports writers, and executives on the show. But tonight's show is proof that we are not all about IU. Tonight's guest is my all-time favorite Purdue player. Why? Maybe because he was such a good high school player playing for a Hall of Fame coach in a town filled with basketball history. Maybe it's because I watched the Indiana All-Star make Purdue so much better and better through his play and leadership. Maybe because I know what Coach Knight thought of him on our scouting reports. Maybe it was because he was such a team player. He could score, but he could pass with the very best of them. Maybe he just wouldn't back down from anyone. He got more out of his 6'1" frame than could ever have been expected. His roots in Indiana run through a small town, Purdue, and the Pacers. He's an NBA champion, and he's coached in the league for multiple teams. He's even coached at the college and high school levels. Jersey 24 at Purdue, 14 for your Pacers, 12 for the Celtics. He is Jerry Sichting, and you get to meet him when we come back.
The Hoosier Basketball Trivia Question, sponsored by Christy, Farrow, Lee, and Bell. Serious injury isn't what we do, it's all we do. Today's question, who is the all-time scoring leader in girls IHSAA basketball? The answer after the break. Now our trivia question answered, sponsored by Christy, Farrow, Lee, and Bell. Serious injury isn't what we do, it's all we do. Today's question, who is the all-time scoring leader in girls IHSAA basketball? The answer, Jackie Young.
Welcome back to the Hoosier Basketball Experience. Jerry Sichting is our guest. Jerry, thank you so much for coming on, especially on Zoom, down from Florida. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for asking me.
Hey, before we get into your great history in basketball that so much epitomizes the Hoosier Basketball Experience, tell us about where you're living now, what you're doing, how the kids are doing, and what they might be doing.
Well, I'm living in Florida. I just moved here a little bit over a year ago, Phil. I was living in Phoenix. I retired from basketball, from work in general, about 2.5 years ago. So we were planning on staying in Phoenix, and then I'm not really sure how we got here, but with I knew a whole lot more people from Purdue and Indiana in general down here, and my wife did too. So we just looked online, found a place, and we got here pretty quickly.
I know
my kids. I've got 4 kids. They're scattered all over the country. I lived in Minnesota for years when I worked for the Timberwolves, so I still have a son there. I have a son in Phoenix. My daughter's in Dallas, and then I have another son that's living here in Florida.
Wonderful. So this is probably going to air in the middle of the winter when it's snow here. It's about 71 and sunny there, isn't it, right now?
Yeah, 72 or 3, but yeah, that's a little chilly for us right now. But no, it's beautiful down here. That's obviously one of the big reasons why we came.
Hey, let's go back to the very start. You're a young kid in Martinsville, Indiana. Tell us about your basketball heroes, how you first got started in the game.
To tell you the truth, the biggest influence, the first thing that really happened was my dad, when I was 3 years old. We were living in an apartment that my grandfather owned, and when he was getting a house, there was a house way out in the country that he was looking at. He was from the country. He grew up in the country. And then there was a house right by the Martinsville City Park. And so if we had to move out in the country, I wouldn't be doing this Zoom call with you probably right now. So he bought the house, and the backyard was literally about 20 feet from the City Park basketball court. So that's how I really started playing. In those days, as you know, without all the internet and all the TV channels, your heroes were the high school players in town. and you got to see a little bit of IU or Purdue basketball on TV. There was one pro game a week on Sundays, but all growing up, all I wanted to do was play for Martinsville High School.
Sure. So Martinsville High School, when was the first time you heard about John Wooden's legend?
I probably really didn't realize it that much until 5th, 6th, 7th grade when I was in it, and I realized that he went to Martinsville High School, and my grandmother actually went to high school with him. And so then UCLA, they were so great back in those years that he was pretty much in his heyday. I wanted to go to UCLA when I found out that he was from Martinsville, and you love all the players and all the All-Americans and pros that came out of there. So that was my fantasy, was to play for UCLA, to be honest with you.
So talk a little bit about your high school days at Martinsville. You had a Hall of Fame coach in Sam Alford. You guys won a sectional or two.
Yeah, we won 2 sectionals my junior and senior year. Coach Alford came my freshman year. And Martinsville had just started that year to become kind of a football power. Bill Seidowitz was the coach. He was there 2 or 3 years before Coach Alford came. And my freshman year, we didn't have much on the varsity. Not a lot of upperclassmen. We had 2 juniors my freshman year that were pretty good. And then so Coach Alford started moving up the freshmen and sophomores to playing, on the JV and the varsity team. So by the end of the year, I was playing some varsity. And then, we just got better and better each year I was there. We lost to Franklin High School my junior year in the Columbus Regional. They had the McLaughlin twins.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a really, really, really good program, and they beat us by like 3 points. And then my senior year in the same Columbus Regional, we lost to Columbus that went to the Final Four. So both times we got beaten in the regional, very close games, and those 2 teams went through the Indianapolis semi-state and went to the Final Four. So my senior year, we were really, really good, and we lost to Columbus, who we had beaten 3 consecutive times, believe it or not, but every game was down to the wire. All 4 games did. So that was heartbreaking not to go to a little farther in the tournament.
Well, winning sectionals, I know how important that was back in that day. You're just 2 years older than I am. And in 1975, we got to win a sectional in Muncie, which was wonderful. But it was mainly because we had one of your Indiana All-Star teammates, Sam Drummer. Talk about the Indiana All-Stars in 1975 and that experience. I think you all got to travel maybe a little more than most.
Oh, yeah, we did. It's kind of funny you brought that up because, I worked with Randy Whitman for years and years, and I played golf with him this past Sunday, and we were talking afterwards, and somehow the subject got on the Indiana All-Star team, and like I said, I've worked with him at least 15 years. And I said something about our All-Star team was able to travel to Europe. And he goes, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. And so I couldn't believe that we'd never talked about it. I thought for sure, maybe he just forgot, how you guys are. But anyway, you played you went to Muncie North?
I went to Muncie North. So I was a sophomore when Sammy was a senior.
Okay. He was an incredible player. He was kind of like, at least at the high school. I mean, I saw him hit his head on the rim one time. I mean, that's how athletic the guy was.
Yeah, we saw him take we saw him take a dollar bill off the top of the backboard.
Did you really?
Yeah.
No, he was the most phenomenal jumper I ever played with at any level. And so he was on the team. Kyle Macy was on the team. But the reason we went to Europe was because in the spring, the Russian junior team, the Soviet Union, I should say, junior team came over and went around the country, played 10 games, and they went 9-1. And we beat them up in Mishawaka. We played them in a game up there, and we really ran them off the court. I don't know what their travel schedule was like. They probably were a little run down or whatever. But so then they invited us to come over to play in the Soviet Union. And the AAU at the time, which kind of oversaw all the Olympic programs and stuff like that, they were based in Indianapolis.
Okay.
So a guy named Jim Fox was the head of the AAU, and he not only did he put that trip together to the Soviet Union, but he put 2 more weeks ahead of that. And we went to Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, Belgium, and we played games there for 2 weeks before we even went to the USSR. So it was a month-long trip, and it was, I mean, for somebody from Martinsville, Indiana that, you know, hadn't been too many places, it was really eye-opening. It was an unbelievable experience.
Oh, I bet. So all of that would have led to you being recruited by a number of schools, including Purdue. And when we come back after these messages, we'll have more with Jerry Sichting and his recruiting process. Welcome back to the Hoosier Basketball Experience. We're here with Jerry Sichting. Jerry, after the All-Star experience, talk a little bit about the recruiting process as it had happened up to that point, if you had not already committed, and what that whole process was like.
Well, recruiting back in those days was a lot different than it is now. You know, everybody commits very early, a lot of times sophomore, junior years. But that was a rarity back when I played. So I was recruited by, you know, Purdue, Alabama, Cincinnati, and Louisville. It really, for me, and Indiana recruited me. They never did actually offer the scholarship. I know Coach Alford was really kind of trying to push me to go there, but it ended up for me down between Purdue and Louisville. And I'd grown up, like I said, my pipe dream was to go to UCLA. Wooden retired in '75, and he never recruited me at all. But so I really loved watching Big Ten games. You know, in the '60s. The Van Arsdales I followed at IU, then it was Mountain, Keller at Purdue, and then you know, Indiana was really good by the time I came out of high school, obviously in the mid '70s. So it was between Louisville and Purdue, and really it was just to play in the Big Ten. I think kind of pushed me towards West Lafayette.
I want you to know that I've heard from Coach Knight and from others who Coach Knight has said this to, that you are the one player that he really regrets he missed on. Had you heard that before?
I've heard that. I read that in a book that I don't know if Bob Hamill wrote it about him or in another book. I've heard him say that. You know, it probably all worked out for the best, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't have played hardly at all my freshman year, and I did more at Purdue. You know, it's Rich Valavicius, who was on my All-Star team. He went to Indiana, but I think he was only there 1 year. Yeah. But you know, I in the summertime when I was in high school, I'd go down and play at the Hyper all the time. You know, I knew, and over the years I knew all the IU guys that played on all those teams. So
sure.
You know, I was able to know all you guys and play with you guys in the summer in Indianapolis and Bloomington, and so you know. It's kind of funny. My connection with IU is still fairly strong, even though I went to Purdue.
Yeah, so Purdue's really lucky to get you. Fred Schaus gets you to sign at Purdue. You go there, and you've had to have watched Walter Jordan and Eugene Parker and Wayne Walls. But talk a little bit about the freshman class that you went in with you and Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle and I both committed to go to Purdue. We were on the same All-Star team. You know, Kyle was Mr. Basketball my senior year, and we, you know, we got along well. The problem at Purdue with Kyle and I both was that Bruce Parkinson was a senior. Eugene Parker was he was just going to be a sophomore our freshman year, and then Bruce Parkinson broke his wrist about 2 or 3 games into the season, and then so he came back the following year. So we had a real logjam with small guards, you know, all of us about the same size. So Kyle transferred, and I was thinking about it because, you know, here we go again. Everybody, you know, it's not going to be a lot of minutes for everybody. Really wasn't in my nature to kind of, you know, give up and go somewhere else. But when Kyle left and went to Kentucky, you know, I just decided to to stay. I knew I would play a lot more my sophomore year, and although I didn't start much, we did play some three-guard offense quite a bit that year. So I got a lot more minutes, and we had a lot of talent on that team. The Big Ten was just loaded in those years, as you know. That was really the late 70s was kind of the golden age. So that was the power. That's where the number one draft choice in the NBA was almost every year.
Absolutely. So you guys go 16-11 in your freshman year, and then as you mentioned, you come back during your sophomore year. You guys went 20-8, finished second in the Big Ten. When, as you already mentioned, I think the Big Ten was as good as it has ever been. Bruce Parkinson is still there. I just saw Bruce Tuesday night up at a girls' game at McCutcheon. His son is coaching IUPUI, and they have a commit that put 37 on us that night. Of course, I wasn't in charge of the defense, so that's why that happened. But I know Bruce, great guy, but I got to tell you, one of my very best friends was a huge John Purdue club guy, so we got to go to Purdue games. And one of my earliest memories of going to Purdue games is the announcer, and I think Bruce may have been leading the country in assists. And Purdue would score a bucket, and they wouldn't even mention the kid's name that scored the bucket. The announcer would say, "And it's another assist by Bruce Parkinson." And you had to play behind that. But you turned into even better passer. I want to ask you about your junior year, where your numbers went incredible in terms of going up. You averaged almost 16 points as a junior and almost 7 assists a game. Talk about that transition from your sophomore to junior year at Purdue.
Well, I became a starter when Parkinson left. It was Eugene Parker and I were the starting backcourt, and there was kind of like this year's Purdue team in a way. There was a lot of depth, expectation from that team. We had everybody coming back except for Bruce. Joe Barry Carroll was going to be a sophomore, and everybody thought he was just going to fill in, and he ended up being a great player, but it didn't happen his sophomore year. But so, I got to play a lot more. We had a very good team. We had some good guys that came off the bench, but we did not max our talent out. I remember there was a preseason poll that even had us number one. I don't know if it was a magazine. It was either a sport magazine, or it might have even been Playboy magazine used to come out and have
they did.
early season rankings or whatever. So anyway, we had all these expectations that we just didn't fulfill that year, and in the end, it was kind of disappointing. We didn't go to either tournament, and that was Fred Schaus's last year too.
But individually, boy, your numbers went way up, and I know you led that team, and that took you into your senior year, which was incredibly successful. Talk a little bit about the fact that Purdue, along with that great Michigan State team with Magic, and I think Iowa, tie for the Big Ten. But somehow Purdue doesn't get to go to the NCAA. Talk about that.
Well, it's like, it's happened to me a couple of times in my career where things like that happen. It's the old thing where they put a stop sign up after a tragic accident. Well, they had the rule, only 2 teams could go from each conference. And the next year they changed the rule. It's kind of ironic because the year after I graduated, Purdue finished 4th in the Big Ten, and they went to the Final Four the next year.
They sure
did. So by the end of my senior year, we could play with anybody. We had a new coach, Lee Rose, and he was fantastic. I mean, he's one of the best coaches I've ever played for. He really was an innovative kind of coach. He did a lot of different things. We practiced differently than I'd ever practiced before or since. Really detail-oriented guy and got the most out of everybody. And he's the one that made Joe Barry Carroll the number one draft choice. He got him in shape finally. Joe Barry had a great junior and senior year. And it was fun. That was the most fun I had in college, was my senior year. Phil, we were projected when they have that media day in Chicago with the Big Ten media and everything. We were picked 9th out of 10 teams.
Wow.
And we ended up tying because we had lost Parker, we lost Jordan, we lost Walls, and everybody thought, and we we didn't play that well the year before, and they thought it was going to be a total rebuilding job. And Coach Rose put some pieces together, and we were a very, very, very good team at the end of the year.
You guys were a great team, and I won't belabor the point that your Purdue team meets our IU team in the finals of the NIT, and it goes down to the last second, the last bucket. But don't talk about that. Just in this last minute before our break, talk about the IU-Purdue rivalry and how you all worked with that during your 4 years at Purdue.
Well, we had our work cut out for us most of the time. IU won the national championship with the undefeated team my freshman year, but we took them. It was either a 2 or 3 point game at IU, similar at Mackey Arena. So obviously we were fired up and played our best against Indiana. But they were just epic battles. I mean, that's when the rivalry is at its best, when both teams are pretty good. It's been up and down since a lot of years, with Katie and Knight had great rivalries. But, coming from so close to Bloomington, it meant everything to me, because most of the people in my town were IU fans, and they always said the same thing. We root for IU, but we pull for you too, one of those.
Yeah.
So,
well, when we come back, all of this led to an NBA career, both as a player and as a coach, and you'll get to hear it when we come back. Well, that's it today for the Hoosier basketball experience. Jerry Sichting, thank you so much for being here. But more importantly, thank you for agreeing to be here next week when we talk about your great NBA career, both as a player and a coach. Jerry, thanks for helping us.
All right, Phil. Been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
See you next week.